Remember also, bring your books in, put them in your lockers so that when we go to turn them in, they're all ready to go. Okay, we've been looking at the Middle East. We've been looking at the beliefs of the people in the Middle East. We've looked at the civilization, a little bit of the history, the religions of the Middle East. And there's one more piece to the puzzle. One of the reasons why we are studying the Middle East the way that we are is because we have such a connection today to the Middle East. How is the United States connected to the Middle East? Who can tell me? What connections does the United States have to the Middle East today? Modern times, right now. Which war? What war is that? Okay. Don't know exactly what it's called. Well, it doesn't necessarily need to have a specific name, but if you can tell me where we are. No, we're not dealing with the Revolutionary War. Okay, we're in Afghanistan fighting against a group called the Taliban, and we'll get into the Taliban tomorrow. We're also someplace else in the Middle East. We're in Iraq, yes. So, we've looked at the religions, we looked at their beliefs. Is there anything in their beliefs that tells people in the Middle East to kill Christians or Jews? No. So there has to be something that causes a very small minority to hate. There are people that hate us. There are people that hate the United States. There are people that hate Jews. There are people that hate Christians. Just like in the United States, there are some people that hate Muslims. And the focus today is to look at why do some people in the Middle East hate the United States? The person that spreads most of this hate is up on the screen right now. Who can identify that person? Who can identify the person whose picture is up on the screen right now? Ooh, only 2 people? That's surprising. 3 people? Job? That is Osama bin Laden. That is Osama bin Laden. And so we're going to look at why some people hate. And one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, is because the West being Europe, the United States, has what they believe interfered in the region. There has been involvement by the West. And when I say West, in Arabic, they call it Al-Maghrib. The West is basically Europe, the United States, Canada, so the Western Hemisphere and Europe. And so there are people in the Middle East that hate Europeans and hate Americans because of what the West has done in the Middle East. Not just right now, but also throughout history. There was a time when the Pope, head of the Catholic Church, when there was no Protestant church, when there was no Lutheranism or Protestantism, said, let's go kill Muslims. Let's take their land. It was called a crusade. And this was back about 800-900 years ago when they began. But it set in their mind that Europeans don't like them. Europeans are coming to try to conquer them. Europeans didn't win the Crusades, but they did lay down this pattern, if you want to use that term, for how Europeans dealt with people in the Middle East. So the Europeans attacked about 900 years ago, and then later on, they came back, and they took over the entire region. In the 1800s and the 1900s, Europeans controlled most of North Africa and the Middle East. They went in and they carved it up. Okay, we'll take over this part. Okay, you take that part. They took a map of the region and laid down rulers and made nice straight lines and carved it up amongst themselves without even thinking about the fact that there were people already living there. Not going to take any notes, Nate? Not going to take any notes? So, to be more specific, France, Spain, Italy, and the United Kingdom took over North Africa. Spain had Morocco, France had Algeria and Tunisia, Italy had Libya, UK had Egypt. They divided it up amongst themselves. And in the Middle East portion, France and the UK took over Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan and divided them up. This was when the United Kingdom was an empire. They controlled India, they controlled the Middle East, they controlled Egypt, they controlled South Africa, Australia, Hong Kong, Southeast Asia. So they look at the Crusades, and then they look at Europeans coming over and taking over the land in the 1800s through the mid-1900s. So not even 60 years ago, much of the Middle East and North Africa was actually owned by European countries. They didn't have their independence. Now, remember when we looked at the civilization, the Arab civilization? Did they accomplish a lot? Do we owe a lot of what we have today to them? Okay, that was the point of that article. Now, imagine you're this proud civilization. You know that you gave Europeans the numbering system, algebra, advances in science and medicine, and horticulture, which is growing things, agriculture. And now these countries come in, take you over, and treat you like you're idiots. Are you going to be happy? You're a very proud country or proud people, but now you're being controlled by somebody else. That's one reason why some people hate. Another reason is there is this guy in Iran, and he was a dictator. He tortured his own people. He locked people up if they said anything bad about him. But he was our friend. He was a friend of the United States. Why do you think the United States was his friend? What does Iran have that the United States might have wanted? I'll give you a hint. Come and listen to a story about a man named Jed. What is it? They had oil, and so we didn't care what the leader did to his own people as long as we had our cheap oil. The dictator was a guy called the Shah of Iran. Shah is sort of like king. Now, at one point, the Shah of Iran comes to Minnesota. He comes to Minnesota to go to the Mayo Clinic. When he comes to the United States for medical treatment, his people rebel against him. He never goes back home. They take over the country. They also take over the U.S. Embassy and hold all the Americans there hostage for over a year. We attempt to go in and rescue them, and then as a result, we lose quite a few helicopters and soldiers. We never did get the hostages back until they were released. It's something like 444 days that they were held. Because the country was so upset with the United States supporting this guy called the Shah of Iran. The people of the government today, that happened in 1980, around 1980, 79 to 1980. The government still hates us today. If you look at the news, Iran does not like us. And there's conflict between the United States and Iran constantly. Another reason? You know that invasion of Iraq, not this last one, but the first one back in the 1990s. The first Gulf War. That looked like, hey, the United States is coming in to try to take us over, just like the Europeans did. Oh, by the way, we'll get to this tomorrow, but the United States also supported another guy in the Middle East. A guy by the name of Saddam Hussein. We used to give him money and weapons. We supported him because he didn't like Iran, and since Iran didn't like us, we figured we would support Saddam Hussein, even though he murdered his own people too. No, he was hanged. Some people in the Middle East, not all, not most, but some people in the Middle East view the U.S. invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan as an attempt of the United States to try to take over the region again, just like Europeans have done throughout history. That's partially why some people hate. They think the United States is there to take over. Whether or not that's true, I can't say. I cannot say if that's true or not, but that's what they feel. That's what they believe. Any question on this part? Do you see how somebody might not like people from another region coming in and trying to tell them what to do? Do you understand why the people in Iran were upset with the United States? Would you like it if another country supported a leader in the United States that took away all your freedoms? It'd take a long time to forget what that country did to you, wouldn't it? Another reason why some people in the Middle East hate is because the West, and again, the West being Europeans and Americans and Canadians, the West supports the country of Israel. And that, in and of itself, is not bad. But you need to know the story behind how Israel was created in order to understand why some people hate. Now, Israel was created after World War II. You learned about Hitler. You learned about genocide. Israel was created after World War II. And after World War II, the winners, the United States, France, Great Britain, they all felt bad about what happened to the Jews. And so they said, we owe them something. We need to compensate them for what happened during the Holocaust. The Holocaust is, remember, the killing of all the Jews in World War II? Is that a good idea? Compensate them for what happened to them? You think they deserve something for what happened to them? Yeah, okay. I think that's a good idea too. Now, what they did was they created this new country of Israel in a place called Palestine. The region that they created it in was a region called Palestine. Now, imagine this situation. Colin, I feel really bad for what happened to you the other day. I feel really bad for what happened to you. I'm sorry I lost your assignment, but I'm not going to make you do it all over again, okay? I'll make it right for you. I'll compensate you for it, okay? Okay, good. I'm keeping it right now. Elijah, do you have your assignment? Okay, please give it to me. Here you go. Have an assignment already finished so that you feel better for what happened to you. Was that fair? Why wasn't that fair? Colin gets compensated for what happened to him. He has an assignment back. What was that? I took it from someone else. Well, I needed to compensate him for it. That was, it was a finished assignment. Why not give it to him? He went through a terrible time because I did something wrong. I should compensate him for it. Is that fair? Guess what? Guess what? That's exactly what happened. The Europeans felt so badly about what happened to the Jews that they stole land from the Arabs and gave it to the Jews without letting the Arabs have any say in the matter whatsoever. Now, if I did that constantly to you, would you be upset? Just a little bit, because all your assignments in the grade book would show missing. Colin gets all his assignments free, and Elijah gets nothing. Is that fair? No. If that happened to you, would that make you happy? What if it was money? What if I stole $50 from Colin? And in order to compensate him, I felt sorry that I stole the $50, so I'm going to take $10 from everybody in the room and give it to him. No. Why? Because I'm the one in authority and you're not. I don't have to compensate you for taking the money because it was for a good cause. It was to help Colin out. No. Ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what Europe did, and the United States was part of this. That's what the West did to the Palestinians. They took Arab land and gave it to the Jews and said, here, have your country. We feel sorry for what happened to you. If we really felt sorry for what happened to you, who should be the one sacrificing? The people that did the deed. If Europeans felt bad for what happened, shouldn't Europeans give the land up? Yeah. Instead of taking somebody else's. Were the Europeans out anything when they did this? Did they sacrifice anything to make the situation better? No. So they said, you know what? We're going to divide up the land. We're going to give the light areas on this map to the Arabs. They can keep that land. We'll take all the rest and give it to the Jews. The Arabs had no say in the matter. They had no choice. If you were an Arab there, would you accept it? Just like if I asked you for $10 to give to Colin because I stole his money, would you give it to me without a fight? No. The United States supports Israel today with money and weapons. We support them with money, we support them with weapons because they're our friends. They are our friends, so we support them. Yes. What? There was no Israel at the time. The reason why Jews didn't live in Israel is because what is now Israel didn't exist. It was Palestine, and it was owned by Arabs. Now, yes. Why didn't they just let them be there and let the Arabs be there too? Because the Jews said, we want our land. They said it was written in the Bible. It was the promised land. God gave us this land, and even though we were kicked out 2,000 years ago, we're coming back. Now, the Arabs fought to try to get their land back. The only problem is they kept losing because they didn't have the fancy weapons that the Israelis or the Jews had. Because who gave them weapons? We did. We gave them weapons, and so when they fought against the Arabs, when the Arabs tried to get their land back, the Arabs finally lost. Now, remember back on that map, there was supposed to be Arab sections and Jewish sections. Israel took over the entire thing now during those wars. Israel now controls 3 areas that the United Nations says is not theirs and that they should give back. What? There are Jews living there, yeah. According to the United Nations, those 3 areas belong to the Arabs. But Israel will not give them back. Even though the United Nations says they should. But we say no, they shouldn't because Israel is our friend. We don't want to make Israel mad. But in the process, we make some Arabs mad, yeah. The 3 areas are the Golan Heights. Golan Heights actually belonged to Syria. Israel took it over in a war and has refused to give it back. That was on your maps. There's the West Bank and Gaza Strip, also labeled on your maps. Also taken over in a war and never given back. So the Arabs fight to get their lands back, but they don't have decent enough weapons. They lose all the wars, and as a result, they have nothing in Palestine. The Palestinians, some of you made their food for the extra credit, don't have their land. Today, the yellow areas are what are supposed to be part of a country called Palestine. But it hasn't happened yet because the Israeli army is all there. have a hard time traveling from one part to the other because Israel closes off the gates, so they can't get in. Israel's also building a wall around the West Bank here so that Arabs can't travel back and forth. Now, during Israel's creation and the wars that happened in the area, many Palestinians fled the region. Women, children, old people, they got out of the way of the fighting. What are people called who are dislocated? They used to live someplace, but because of a war, they are forced to go someplace else. Anybody know what that word is? Starts with an R. Starts with an R. Somebody that's displaced. They're basically kicked out of their homes, have no place to go. Victor? They are rejected, but that's not the word I'm looking for. Espen? They are refugees. Yes, refugees. Now, there are over 4 million Palestinian Arabs that got kicked out, living someplace else. They left to avoid the fighting and have never been allowed back. 4 million Palestinian refugees living elsewhere. Some of them are living in other countries, in houses, but there's 1 million of them living in what is called refugee camps. 1 million Palestinian Arabs living in a refugee camp. Refugee camps. Refugee camps are basically makeshift cities made with supposed to be temporary housing until they can make it back. There were refugee camps set up after Hurricane Katrina so that the people in New Orleans had places to live, and the idea was that they would go back. That hasn't happened with the Palestinians. They have not been allowed to go back by Israel. This is one of the refugee camps from space. This entire thing that you see here is a refugee camp. People, when they fled Israel, went there and built what they could build for a place to live. No running water, sort of like in Haiti. If I zoom in, notice these buildings. Does it look like that they are nice buildings? Does it look like they have lots of room? Sort of crammed? Here's a street view. Made out of whatever you could find, and then packed with mud. Now, if you grew up there, and you knew that you had a home that was much better someplace else, but you weren't allowed to go there, how would you feel? Upset? What did you say? What? OMG! Oh my God! This is the kind of place that many terrorists come from because they are frustrated with the situation. They're upset that they have a home someplace, but they're not allowed to go there. They're upset that somebody took their land away and gave it to somebody else without their permission. Sort of like somebody's assignment I just took and gave to somebody else. Now, when it comes time to ask that person that got the land, will you please give it back? They're as stubborn as colonists. No, we're not going to give it back. It's our land. God promised it to us in the Bible. So, summary. I'm going to boil it down to 2 ideas. Why people hate. This is the kind of thing that Osama bin Laden feeds on. He uses this to his advantage. He says that, oh, you're poor, you're upset, you're angry. Come fight for me and we'll fight back. But we'll fight back using terrorism because we don't have an army. We can't play by the rules. So the only way to win is by not playing by the rules, by cheating. Many people in the Middle East feel that the United States and Europe don't care about Arabs. They don't care about Muslims. They know what the living situation is like in the refugee camps. They know that people had their land taken away from them and given to somebody else. But they act as if they don't care. That's what many people in the Middle East feel. Now, many people in the Middle East feel like this, but they're not terrorists. They also feel that the only reason why the United States and Europe gets involved in the Middle East is not to make their lives better, but to get their oil. Would we have troops in the Middle East if the Middle East didn't have oil? That's a tough question. There are some people that say, no, we wouldn't. There are other people that say, yes, we would. We supported the Shah of Iran because he had oil. We supported Saddam Hussein because he had oil. We support the king in Saudi Arabia because he has oil. We don't get involved in countries like Sudan, but Sudan doesn't have oil. So, why? People hate.